You know, just talking is not going to help our people. We need actions. And what we also see from the social movement is that the social movement themselves, the leaders, like Brother Hashim, who said he has been in the social movement organizations for a long time. It's the leaders themselves, they might become politicians, like what happened in South Africa. In the apartheid time, we knew that social movement organizations were the ones that played the most important role in fighting against apartheid. But after 1994, most of them, they became politicians. So you might say they might not represent today the needs of the society, I mean the poor communities. So we should not, even when we become politicians, we should always be the representatives of the communities that we came from. So now I have a question to Brother Hashim, because I might see him as an expert in the social movement. Okay, sorry. My question is, if a social movement leader become, a politician, or a social movement joins a political path, what can be the relationship? You know, what can happen?
I will take the first very interesting and important question from my comrade from Somalia. I think what we've been discussing here and being the debates in many of our countries is how do people be involved in framing the developments of their society? How do people be involved in framing mining policies? How do the people exert their power? This is what this politics is about. We have been framed of thinking of politics as, we have the politicians, we have the activists and social movement and the community-based organization, and then we have the trade unions, with each a different role. And this is part of the problem, that we see that some people are politicians. We are all politicians because we are challenging power relation. Politics is about power.
And this classical terms of seeing politics is one of the problems that we are having. That is, we see politics as something for Zuma or for my beloved Prime Minister. And politics is not for us. Politics is for the people, because each struggle that we are in, fighting for minimum wage, we are challenging power relations. If we are fighting against land grabbing, we are fighting for a new balance of power. This is what politics is about. Liberal democracy, liberal politics has separated these things. And I think that the ultimate aim of community organizing is community power building. So we need to rethink and maybe reinvent politics itself. If you look at around what is happening in some countries, you will see the emergence of what I will call, I don't like the word new left, but I would call the kind of reshaped left that is emerging. You see in Bolivia, the political power that emerged, that is now in power, emerges from social movement. Lots of tension, lots of contradiction, but it emerges from social movement. What is happening now in Greece? It's a mixture of, Sipas was a young communist leader 20 years ago. And Syriza is the product of social struggles. You know, what would you have said to the people of Greece? Leave this for the politician and the corrupt person, and don't get involved in the sphere of contesting power. If you don't do this, you are not challenging the present balance of power that is one of the causes of the problem. This is my first part to your question. Second, you know, if you look at history, let's take from my own country. You know, for example, the trade union right didn't exist. Okay. It was the foundation of the Labour Party that created the condition for us to have the right to unionize. It was politics that created the space for trade union and workers' rights. You know, whereas in Britain, for example, it was the trade union that gave birth to the Labour Party. Yeah. So, you know, because the elites and those who have been shaping power for the last 20 or 30 years have been, you know, giving, you know, kind of been exposing the degeneration of politics itself. We need to reappropriate politics. This is the way. It's not a question of me becoming MP. Fortunately, I wasn't elected in the last election. I got 9% of the vote. I wasn't elected. It's not because of me not elected. It's the power that the movement represents and the project that we represent that we want to bring forward. I think it's a very, very important question. I asked for the question of, you know, how to deal with investors. You know, nobody is against foreign investment. Okay, but the question is, you know, globalization, the new capitalist architecture, has meant a very simple and very profound thing. It's disempowering nation and the people. This is what happened. So you can get a company that can sue a government. You can get the interest of companies, of corporate, take precedence over the interest of the people. So I think the first thing to reflect is precisely how to reclaim and re-establish the power, the sovereignty of the people, not the elite, not the corruptly political class. How to reclaim people's sovereignty. And it is in this relation, new relation, and new kind of mediation that we need to relate with investors. It's from the premise that it's the people's interest and it's the people's sovereignty that must take precedence over, you know, corporate interests. I would end here because I've taken too much time.
My name is Philip Kilonzo. I work with ActionAid Kenya. And in the beginning, I just bring in some perspectives. I think Kenya, we are learning and we are following on the paths and the footsteps of the rest of the countries in Africa. And therefore, we are not different, even though we are quite new in terms of some of these resources. Throwing on table, I think there is conflicts that are beginning. And these simmering conflicts are intra-communities, and therefore we need to bring them on table so that we don't lose them. Right at the point of discovery of resources, we have conflicts among communities. We've seen communities in West Pokot and communities in Turkana bickering one another because of the resources that are there.
And in essence, it's because the systems of securing the rights of communities around land and other resources are not well defined. So we need to begin from there before we even get the investor on board. But the question that I want to really pose to the team is, do we have a model anywhere in Africa or anywhere else in the world where partnerships between this and local have great benefits for community? The battery that is dying. The battery is the one that is dying. So what I'm asking is, do we have models on and say out of this particular model, we have clarity that if we promote greater partnerships between the communities and the local units of government, of resources. That's the first question that I'd like to put to you. The second.
Yeah, can we come back to your question? We've just got two other people.
Did you get the question?
Yeah.
The second area of concern is around, and forgive me, I come from a background that is interesting. I believe all governments have illegitimate deals in land. They have no business in land. Because in essence, land in traditional Africa belongs to kingdoms and communities in those kingdoms. And therefore, the notion of public land is a notion that is misplaced in Africa. And therefore, the question that I have is, what are some of the mechanisms that we can actually put in place to fast-track ring-fencing of resources to communities? Because essentially land minerals seem yet to be getting away from the control of these communities. What are some of the mechanisms that we can put in place to really advance that? Now, coming to African level, how do we ensure that AU NEPAD is truly an institution that promotes policy interests for Africans? Because again, when I read documents at that level, sometimes I get sad and I stop reading. I've actually stopped reading policy documents from that level. And I don't do that. So I'm wondering, is there something that can be done at that particular level to enhance the Africanization of policies, particularly on land and resources?
It's Rodney. I work with ActionAid. I'm from Zimbabwe. And instead of us being proud, we are really sad. I think the narrative here and from the mining in Durban is just the same. We are sorry with what is happening. My question is, how can this narrative or the discussion points that are generated here going to find their way to the other discussions that are happening on the program of infrastructure development in Africa? Because I think this is very important. When Fatima, when you presented my sister, I had an opportunity just to check the document on program on infrastructure development in Africa. It doesn't talk of the renewable resources. So this is the opportunity that the private sector takes advantage of, and they bring in the issue of coal. To my brother from Mauritius, thank you very much for bringing in the issues that are rising in Africa. My other contribution on that list is the issue of competition among us as Africans in terms of investors, bringing investors in our country. We don't have an aggregated regulation framework that will say that what is not permissible in Zimbabwe, what is not permissible in South Africa, should not be permissible in Mozambique. So they take advantage of what is happening in Mozambique. They take advantage of the regulations framework in other countries. And at the end of the day, it's us losing. So the question is, what shall we do? What can we do to regulate competition among us so that these investors don't take advantage of us? Thank you very much.
I've got two related questions. The first, I'm knowledgeable on Mozambique, but I'm happy to hear from the other countries represented. In terms of getting information about what's happening with deals being signed and different agreements being negotiated, are there struggles from activists on the ground in accessing that information, and is the legislation around that useful at all in championing those battles? Related to it then is, and I know none of you have come as journalists specifically, but what kind of struggles or opportunities are you seeing from the field of journalism and specifically investigative journalism in articulating these stories, if that happens at all? I know the story from Mauritius perhaps begins to speak to that, but I'd be interested.
Was surprised there. I just make my comment on the African rising narrative. So the African rising, if you haven't heard about it, it's the notion that it's our continent's era, that things are happening for us. We've had a century of poverty and misery, and things are turning around now. And it's a very fallacious narrative. It's based on the conception that our growth rates are very high. Now, comparatively, it is high. The average growth rate for African countries is 3.6. Many African countries are actually growing at 2 digits. If you look at DRC, Nigeria. So what happens is investors from other countries look at these countries as lucrative investment opportunities in a context where Europe is growing at 1%. And where are they putting their money? In the mines. And what this means is suddenly you have countries like Ghana reclassified as middle income countries because they calculate the value of the economy based on those investments. But there are 2 big things that happen. The one is, once you are reclassified as middle income country, as South Africans, you lose all your development aid. This has disastrous consequences for civil society organizations on our continent, very dependent on those historical funding. The second thing is poverty actually deepens. We know that nowhere on the continent the mining communities benefit from mining operations. So at the heart of our conversation is, if we're not going to say leave the minerals in the ground, we're going to say let's use mining as a developmental generator, as something that actually rises Africa. Governments are not going to figure out what that looks like, what that mining model looks like. So if we are not proactive in imagining what it looks like to take minerals out of the ground, so that number one, communities who live at mines benefit from it, but also the country and the continent more generally benefits, is not going to happen. So the point that I want to make is there is no Africa rising. There's a few men, and I do say men, not in a generalized way. It's not women getting rich of our continent. It's a few men investors getting insanely rich of our minerals. So when I hear about Mozambique, I get really nervous for your money. I get worried about what's happening to what's going to come to you. Thank you.
Like, we need actions. The camera over there, and the woman, you know,
said like, what shall we do? And I think everybody can get tired of many meetings, and I think it only makes sense to go to the meetings if you can learn something. Really learn something, and if you can articulate joint action, joint campaigns, and so on with another comrades. If you have this on the horizon, even though although you cannot go to a very, I can say, useful meeting, but if you can go back stronger than you can, it makes sense. And I'm thinking about how can we build this kind of thing that our country here just said. And our movement get organized in 3 ways, like 3 arms. And this is a very common way to get organized in a popular movement in Brazil. The first way and first arm is like the formation. When you get to study, get education for our country that you are living in, and in that sense, make meetings make a sense. The go to meetings is a sense if you help this formation. The second one is the organization. Doesn't make sense to get a building and do like spontaneous action, and if you don't know if the next week you will, make the profits of this action. So you have to do a continued organization, make with the basis, with the coordinations, in a continual flux between them. And you have to do this. You have to make organic people thinking about how can we deal together with our problems and conflicts. And the last one, but not less important, is the mobilization. So how to get in actions, really actions. Litigation can be an action, is not the only action possible. And when we talk about mobilization, we talk more in a sense of the big marks, the radical actions, the direct actions. So if you can combine the formation of the activities that belong to your movement, to your organization, with organic people thinking of this, and make, when it's necessary, direct actions, mobilize more people, you can do something. I think this is the way that we are trying to build our movement there.
I was trying to answer a question of you to say how to build the relationship between communities and local municipalities. I think this kind of platforms is where, as communities, we need to sit really next to the people that can interpret what has been said and cascade the language, because we are having the problem of language barrier as communities. And it's difficult for us to go back and translate the real message that really was talking about in the sessions like this. When you go to confront local municipalities, it's difficult to read their budget and interpret those and also cascade that language to your fellow community members. So I think as communities, to build a relationship with local government, if we had, we really need to do that, because indeed they're still governing us. And this fight that we are in, the struggles that we are in, we can't overcome that overnight. We really have to start somewhere in order to be somewhere and achieve. We can't just think everyone understands and everyone is one boat with us. We need to understand that we are on the train as facilitator read these songs of who was that? You must give. So this train that we are driving, we must make sure that everyone understands the direction where I'm really going, because it doesn't help to talk big languages without checking that we're leaving the masses behind. We'll end up finding ourselves being three inside the train, assuming that everyone is with us. So I was trying to just convey this message, answering Philip's question, because the big issue is how to build, because we find ourselves being alone, leaving the masses behind. We need to watch each other's backs. I think that is the most biggest barrier in every African country.
Thank you. I, as the chair, have taken liberty that we're going to close the discussion. I think this, as Fatima pointed out and Maloko now so aptly described, this is the start of the conversation. We see the train moving and we want to be part of that train journey. We want to be on the platform. I think the ideas of what we're going to bring into that train and the whole narrative of Africa rising, perhaps it is about rising Africa and how we will bring different issues and debates into it. I think we have, I think Mozambique needs our help. I think Brazil have had particular experiences that we have to bring on board. I don't think we can I've just been told that there's someone from one of the organizations that have to give some perspective. It's not giving a question, but rather some comments to the debate. So it's a comment from Macau.
Yeah, thank you, comrade. My name is Michel Dumont. I'm from Goa. I think our program, the biggest problem that we do is to be reactive rather than more to be proactive. We are meeting here today because there's one leader and your alternative mining. And we are tired of seeing our land being robbed or water poisoned and becoming tolerated. It's very important for especially the NGOs that is, can meet quarterly or monthly, wherever. And to all the countries that are affected by mining, they should meet. We hope the confidence plan and all that stuff. So my strategy, as you said, Fatima, we should look at the strategy. The strategy will be all the NGOs in Africa, Brazil, Mauritius. You should have a strategy of you meet quarterly and talk around the issues and go back to your community so that one day we can act as one. We can just be talking and so on. And just wait for money for next year and then we meet again and so on. Talk to the Brazilians, talk to Mauritius, talk to Zimbabwe, talk to all African countries and say, what can we do? What can we do? And then let me tell you, communities are organized. And if we can sort of action today, then it comes we will come up with action. But what we need is to say those people, NGOs can be able to have resources to meet and strategize and then report back to the community and make sure we come up with a plan of how do we stop this state robbing us. That's it. Leader from Mauritius. Where is that money?
Because this morning, during the alternative mining in Durban, there was a presenter who gave a presentation, and after the presentation, he said, "May you please don't ask me questions. I'll give you my email address. Then you will send questions, then I will respond to you." That is the beginning of an alternative which will never end. If we then have such people who will not take questions and say, over 300 people must send their questions, then I'll respond later. So, but during the course of the day, I was involved and I participated in a discussion where it was an issue about silicosis. While there is HIV, there is tuberculosis, which has got some medication to manage at least those diseases. But silicosis, we were told, there is no cure. Once we have silicosis, then you have to wait for your death day. So I said to myself, I think now we need to think alternative to the alternative. If we have Makua today and other organizations around the world, while they dine and wine at the mining now, we need to be out, get out of the mining homes and be along the streets in pickets against what decisions, the avalanche of issues which we have talked about as the alternative mining now. That's my point, to say as part of a member of the People's Dialogue, I'm one, next year we don't have to be counting the 7th alternative mining dam. We must bring that to an end. We must be away from Cape Town, and we must be in the mining areas, out of the mining. I almost said asphalt, but the mining holes in protest against the alternative, the mining in Durban. Thank you.
Manja, and we should begin by presenting exactly our struggles. I think what it should be is Africa falling, Africa rising. I think if you ask any elitist today, they will tell you Africa is developing or it's rising. I think the real issue is Africa is uprising. Because it's rising, as our brother there from Mauritius saying, it's rising in corruption, looting, and then extractivism, and it's not going to people. It's rising in the death of Africans. Mine.
I think for me, if you want to cut off coming to Cape Town to alternative mining in Durban, we on the street on a daily basis next year so that we crush that madness that is happening in ICC. For me, it's an alternative to say that, comrades, let's go out, let's be on the streets, let's drive a revolution and make sure that we come up with a real solution for what is happening in ICC's craziness currently.
Philip was asking about models. I don't think we have a blueprint model of partnership that we can copy from one particular context and fit it as it is in another context. But of course, there is always a possibility for learning. I'm saying it because, for instance, I'll just give two examples. In the case of the 30 province, where Valley is exploring coal, they had to do resettlement. And in the workshop presenting the methodology for doing the resettlement, honestly speaking, there was no way of not agreeing with the presentation. But in reality, when they did the resettlement of the 2,500 families, they got worse than they were. And the worst side of the story was to hear a Mozambican from the government when we were complaining about the worst conditions. He's saying, at least now they have a house. Before they didn't have a house. So this takes me to the second example that is so complex when we discuss models, how to bring it for a particular context. Because in the context of Mozambique, the politicians, the political elite, they are linked with the economic elite, and they've created a mafia in such a way that they control everything. And the system is so corrupted, to respond to my sister from Cape Town, to a level that extractive industry became a war zone. The journalists that they want to talk about it, they are simply killed. I think you might have heard about Carlos Cardoso, who was simply shot in the daylight. We have an economist called Siba investigating the amount of money that was being drilled into those schemes. Our former president, he's a partner of all kinds of business that goes to Mozambique. He's known as Mr. 10%. These economists that he was investigating, he fell on his offices, on the stair, and he died. So he was killed. So colleagues, we need to count on ourselves. We are in a war. That is the reality that we are. Therefore, it's important that when we talk about partnership, we talk about all those policies and so forth, that we need to bring it to us. It's up to our solidarity in this room. Africa, Latin America, farmers movement, labor union, so that it's us that we are going to resolve the issue. Thinking that the partnership with the private sector, the partnership with the government will resolve, I really, really doubt that that is the way that we should go. Therefore, I concur with those that argue that we need to radicalize the struggle, because otherwise they will not listen to us. Thank you.
And the woman said, like, what shall we do? And I think everybody can get tired of many meetings. And I think it only makes sense to go to the meetings if you can learn something, really learn something, and if you can articulate joint action, joint campaigns, and so on with another comrades. If you have this on the horizon, even though although cannot go to a very, I can say, useful meeting, but if you can go back stronger than you can, you make sense. And I'm thinking about how can we build this kind of thing that our comrade here just said. And our movement get organized in 3 ways, like 3 arms. And this is a very common way to get organized in a popular movement in Brazil. The first way and first arm is like the formation. When you get to study, get education for our conflict that you are living in, and in that sense, make meetings make a sense. The go-to meetings is a sense if you help this formation. The second one is the organization. Doesn't make sense to get a building and do like spontaneous action, and if you don't know if the next week you will, I don't know, make the profits of this action. So you have to do a continued organization, make with the basis, with the coordinations, in a continued flux between them. And you have to do this. You have to make organic people thinking about how can we deal together with our problems and conflicts. And the last one, but not less important, is the mobilization. So how to get in actions, really actions. Litigation can be an action, is not the only action possible. And when you talk about mobilization, we talk more in a sense of the big march, the radical actions, there are direct actions. So if you can combine the formation of the activists that belong to your movement, to your organization, with organic people thinking of this, and make, when it's necessary, direct actions, mobilizing more people, you can do something. I think this is the way that we are trying to build our movement there.
Mine, I would try to answer the question of to say how to build the relationship between communities and local municipalities. I think this kind of platforms is where, as communities, we need to sit really next to the people that can interpret what has been said and cascade the language, because we are having the problem of language barrier as communities. And it's difficult for us to go back and translate the real message that you really was talking about in the sessions like this. When you go to confront local municipalities, it's difficult to read their budget and interpret those and also cascade that language to your fellow community members. So I think as communities, to build a relationship with local government, if we really need to do that, because indeed they're still government, they're still governing us. And this fight that we are in, the struggle that we are in, we can't overcome that overnight. We really have to start somewhere in order to be somewhere and achieve. We can't just think everyone understands and everyone is one boat with us. We need to understand that we are on a train as facilitator read these songs of, who was that? You must again. So this train that you are driving, we must make sure that everyone understands the direction where are we really going, because it doesn't help to talk big languages without checking that we are leaving the masses behind. We'll end up finding ourselves being three inside the train, assuming that everyone is with us. So I was trying to just convey this message, answering Philip's question, because the big issue is how to build, because we find ourselves being alone, leaving the masses behind. We need to watch each other's backs. I think that is the most biggest barrier in every African country. Thank you.
Thank you. As the chair, I'm taking liberty that we're going to close the discussion. I think this, as Fatima pointed out and Maloko now so aptly described, this is the start of a conversation. We see the train moving and we want to be part of that train journey. We want to be on the platform. I think the ideas of what we're going to bring into that train and the whole narrative of Africa rising, perhaps it is about rising Africa and how we will bring different issues and debates into it. I think we have, I think Mozambique needs our help. I think Brazil have had particular experiences that we have to bring on board. I don't think we can I've just been told that there's someone from one of the organizations that have to give some perspective, who's not giving a question, but rather some comments to the debate. So it's a comment.
I think our problem, the biggest problem that we do is to be reactive more to be proactive. We are meeting here today because there's mining and alternative mining. And we are tired of seeing our land being robbed, our water poisoned, and we come here and talk about that every day. It's very important for especially the NGOs that can meet quarterly or monthly, whatever, and to all the countries that are affected by mining, they should meet. We have G8, which is the contingency plan and all that stuff. So my strategy, as you said, Fatima, we should look at strategies. The strategy will be all the NGOs in Africa, Brazil, Mauritius, and so on. You should have a strategy of you meet quarterly and talk around these issues and go back to your communities so that one day we can act as one. We cannot be talking and so on, and just wait for money for next year and then we meet again and so on. Talk to the Brazilians, talk to Mauritius, talk to Zimbabwe, talk to all the African countries and say, what can we do? What can we do? And then let me tell you, communities are organized. And if you can talk of action today to any community, we will come up with an action. But what we need is to say those people, NGOs who can be able to have resources to meet and strategize and then report back to the communities and make sure we come up with a plan of how do we stop this state robbing us.
Thank you for the organizers of the mining in the alternative mining in the and the ActionAid and People's Dialogue for organizing this meeting. Fatima said, let's be careful not to make this alternative Indaba be an alternative forever. That's struck. Because this morning, during the alternative mining in Indaba, there was a presenter who gave a presentation, and after the presentation, he said, may you please don't ask me questions. I'll give you my email address, then you will send questions, then I will respond to you. That is the beginning of an alternative which will never end. If we then have such people who will not take questions and say that over 300 people must send their questions, then I'll respond later. So, but during the course of the day, I was involved I participated in a discussion where it was an issue about silicosis. While there is HIV, there is tuberculosis, we just got some medication to manage at least those diseases. But silicosis, we were told, there is no cure. Once we have silicosis, then you have to wait for your death day. So I said to myself, I think now we need to think alternative to the alternative. If we have Makua today and other organizations around the world, while they dine and wine at the mining industry, we need to be out, to get out of the mining holes and be along the streets and pickets against what decisions, the avalanche of issues which we have talked about as the alternative mining industry. That's my point, to say as part of a member of the People's Dialogue, I'm one, next year we don't have to be counting the 7th alternative mining industry. We must bring that to an end. We must be away from Cape Town, and we must be in the mining areas, out of the mining, I almost said asphalt, but the mining holes in protest against the alternative, the mining in our country.
By representing exactly our real struggles. I think what it should be is Africa falling, Africa rising. I think if you ask any elites today, they will tell you Africa is developing,
or it's rising. I think the real issue is Africa is uprising. Because it's rising, as our brother there from Mauritius said, it's rising in corruption, looting, and the extractivism. And it's no benefit to our people. It's rising in the death of Africans. Am I here?
I think for me, if we want to cut off coming to Cape Town to alternative mining in Davao, we must be on the street on a daily basis next year so that we crush that madness that is happening in ICC. For me, it's an alternative to say that, comrades, let's go out, let's be on the streets, let's drive the revolution and make sure that we come up with a real solution to what is happening. ICC is craziness currently.
To all the panelists, you've been talking about strategy, but still we are asking the people, what strategy for us women? We are in the center of all the bad impacts. I didn't hear something coming strongly to say what strategy. We've been a lot of discussion this morning showing that women are the more affected. But still, in this debate, we actually didn't talk about it. When I saw the presentation, I'm just asking myself, how women will be able to access to those jobs? So we still have to think about it. When we are talking about strategy, just separate and concentrate on people who are the most affected. It's women. So what strategy are specific to a women issue?
But I think, Sister, your question is very important, but I don't think we have the answers. I think what we said from the beginning, it is about bringing together people, having communities, a grassroots perspective on getting those answers. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, and I don't think we have the luxury right now to give you all the answers what you might want, but it is the start of a conversation, and I think this was the idea of ActionAid and People's Dialogue organizing this, is to start the debate, and as the comrade pointed out, I think a quarterly event for communities being impacted by mining, I definitely think it's a fantastic idea, and I'm sure Chris and Fatima and other people will take those ideas forward to take it beyond the alternative.
If we just talk directly to each other, you know, we can't do this hotel thing. This is one of the things we've got to let go. There's a beautiful tradition in the experience in Latin America where people's organizations host each other in their homes. Find the money for a plane ticket, go. Get immersed in each other. So if you don't know the People's Dialogue, talk to the people here in the context of globalization. I think we must fight our struggles where we find the battles, but we have to talk to each other because we are here, it's value everywhere. It's the same companies doing the same thing over again, so we can't have little localized struggles that's not connected internationally. And it's not only the NGOs that must be talking, it's the movements that's more important. So I'm challenging the movements, don't wait for the NGOs, talk to them about the resources to make it happen, but actually the beauty of the alternative mining data, I think there's something like 20 or 30 African countries there over the last 2 days. We should be talking directly to each other, making the arrangements so that we come to each other, see the strategies we employ, what works and what doesn't. But really don't put all the power of the NGOs, it's not going to happen.